Thanks everyone for coming tonight. This is a really nice turnout. My name is Lisa Conway, and I'm the chair of the art department here at Clark College and the head of the ceramics area. I'm very happy to be introducing our speaker, Whitney Lowe, tonight. Can everyone hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Yes, as the first speaker in the Clark Art Talk Visiting Artist Series for this school year.
It's all downhill from now on.
I've been a fan of Whitney's work and his sparkling personality for a long time now, and I'm really excited to have him here at Clark College, seriously. Whitney started his career as a designer in New York. He's worked as a designer in Amsterdam and Tokyo and Hong Kong. In 1997, he moved out here to accept a job as a creative director at Wieden & Kennedy creative agency in Portland. He's worked for several Los Angeles graphic design firms. He's also worked as a book designer and as a music editor. Whitney studied architecture at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. He has a BFA in graphic design from the Art Center College of Art and Design in California. He has a post-bac certificate in ceramics from the Oregon College of Art and Craft. And he served as the instructor at the MFA Applied Graphic Design program at the Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland from 2010 until 2019. Whitney is now mostly known to me as a consummate ceramic artist, and he brings all of his design experience to that work as well. He has a show of his work up right now at the Froelich Gallery in the Pearl District in Portland, and it is up for one more week. So I encourage all of you to trek on over to see that gallery show while it's still up through October 12th. If you haven't already, you might want to silence your cell phones. And it's really great to see so many students with their sketchbooks and pencils and pens out, ready. So please join me in welcoming Whitney Lowe.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I feel like I can take out half of the presentation. Jean-Luc Godard, in his recent film from 2018, says, man's true condition to think with hands. When people visit with the sole purpose, my home and studio, of looking at work and descending down the stairs to the studio, it's always interesting for them and for me to initially let them experience the space without my saying anything, or urging them to divert their attention to this work or activity. Of course, I'll judge the person visiting and decide whether to keep, lower, or turn off the techno music. So here is a few minutes of silence with a series of images that replicates that experience. So, leaving Sacramento in 1976, I went on to study, as Lisa mentioned, architecture at Cal Poly, and then on to study graphic design at Art Center. I went on to work in New York for several years and spent much of the year 1986 in Amsterdam to work with Crazy Man, jazz drummer, and Dutch founder of the Fluxus movement in Holland, Anton Becke. Returning to the US to set up shop, this was late in the 1980s, I formed a graphic design studio known as Reverb with 4 other designers. Years later, in 1994, we won the Chrysler Award for Design Innovation. It was around this time that I started collecting ceramics, which became an obsession, an intellectual frontier, and what demanded a full, deep dive. In 1997, I was recruited, again as Lisa said, by the advertising agency White & Kennedy here in Portland as the creative director on the Microsoft account. Stationed years later at the office of White & Kennedy in Amsterdam for several months in 2000, I came across a catalog for the Primavera Gallery of a show called The London Group that featured 5 German ceramists. Walter Popp, Karl Ursula Scheid, the Weigels, Lotte Reimers, and best of all, Beate Kuhn. It was really that moment in the bookshop in Amsterdam when I flipped to Ms. Kuhn's work that I was literally floored by the beauty, the complexity, the sculptural quality, and just the astounding eroticism of her work. So I went on a mad search for her work everywhere. And these 2 works from my collection, the work on the left is a real iconic work of hers called Spine Tower. And Edmund de Waal writes about a similar piece in his book, 20th Century Ceramics. Beate Kuhn made severe work which shared these concerns: biomorphism, structural organicism, skeletal forms of creatures and plants, some pieces based on vertebra, others with complex structures constructed from multiple repeated elements. And then in 2001, so this was an incredible shift for me, and I think for many people, particularly my generation. I know that I look into the crowd and there's a lot of young people here where this may not have been too significant other than a distant memory. But for me, it was really a wake-up call. I've been on the expected trajectory of someone pursuing acclaim, fame, and possibly lots of money in the design world. And all of a sudden, this particular event rendered everything totally insignificant. Physical things happened, emotionally things happened, and I really lost my way and trajectory within the design world. So, I entered Oregon College of Art and Craft in the post-bac program in ceramics, having been interviewed by a person in the audience, Thomas Ord, here sitting. And I revealed to him that I had never touched wet clay before. But he let me into the program nonetheless. Quite recently, I came upon this question and answer in the book review of the New York Times, and I'm going to read it to you. The question posed by the author, Greg Iles. What moves you most in a work? And Greg answers, insight, which as a rule is earned only through suffering. Observation can get you close, but to touch the essence of something, one must see through the eyes of lived experience. So the rest of the presentation is going to be about my work, particularly about the 3 shows that I've had at Frelick Gallery here in Portland. And from that time between OCAC and 2014, when I had my first show, this is the first one, called A Road and a Picnic. Strange name or title for a show. It's based on 2 novels, Roadside Picnic, the science fiction novel by the Strugatsky brothers, written in the 1970s, and The Road by Cormac McCarthy. It was comprised of black sculptural works, much of them viewed as vessels, and 12 wall works. The black freestanding sculptures and vessels are informed by that Russian novel in which the earth is littered with strange objects, some beneficial, some harmful, some inscrutable, the detritus of mysterious alien visitations. I think I want to point out here that this was the period of making in the late single digits of 2000 into the early teens. And there's all of a sudden a recognition as clay is really of interest to the fine art world. And with that ascension of that medium and all these incredibly imaginative people, realizing that clay is going to become a material that is very much in vogue, all these wonderful things start happening with the material. Much of it is rather loose, messy, colorful, narrative-based, and I think the work that I was doing was intentionally to, given my contrarian nature and personality, to do something completely opposite. I wanted the work to be mysterious, elegant, like Ms. Kuhn's work, made of repeated elements. I wanted the work to be almost silhouette-like, to deny its reading as shape, and to create kind of a collapsed aesthetic where things become very flattened, even though it's of a 3-dimensional nature. I kind of think of this as conceptual and aesthetic directness. Should I say that word again? Directness. The book goes on to describe an alien object as the empty. And this is a passage from Roadside Picnic, again by the Strugatsky brothers. Just 2 copper discs, the size of a saucer, about an inch, quarter-inch thick, with a space of 1.5 feet between them. And for all that, there is some force between them, as I understand it, because you can't press them together, and no one's been able to pull them apart. I really loved the simplicity of the description, the total understanding of the form, even if there are words on a page, and the complete mysteriousness of being with that object if you saw it in person. So this is a painting by Frank Stella. It's the work that really put him on the map in the art world, possibly from his very first show at Leo Castelli. And Roberta Smith, the lead art critic of the New York Times, writes this in a review of his show at L&M that was rehung a couple of years ago. The Stellas here, from which this work comes from, progressively articulate a new agreement between painting as image and as object. Perhaps the Frank Stella quote, "What you see is what you see," regarding, again, this black painting, conveys this idea of aesthetic directness. This is a work that I'm particularly proud of because it does something to the viewer that perhaps that object that I just described from Roadside Picnic. Now, this looks like a bunch of cylinders that are just placed around the rim of an oval. But as most of you know, or will soon realize, working with clay as a material, that there's incredible violence that happens in the transformation of clay between wet greenware and it ultimately being fired in bisque, which is around 1800 degrees, and the final cone 6 firing that I fire at, which is nearly 2200 degrees. And this is how it was constructed. It's actually the slant of 2 half cylinders that create the complete cylinder in its cut top rim, but then splays out to connect to the base oval, thus creating a very stable, linked situation. This isn't a work of mine, even though I'd love to say it was. I hope that some or all of you got a chance to see the Hans Koper Less is More show at the Oregon Jewish Museum, but it just left, so too late if you didn't see it. He is really one of the most renowned potters of the 20th century, known for many things, but I think what I'm most astounded by, which you can get a sense of here, is the captured volume within the throne form. But there's something key about this that I'm going to read here. Koper considered the graphic mark on the surfaces of a ceramic object as more real than the unmarked, implacable surface. He was exploiting surfaces of a ceramic objects, much as a sculptor might use the patination of metal to lead the viewer to move around the entire object. I'm going to spend a little time talking about a work that's very important to me because it's loaded with many ideas. I'm most pleased with the title too, because I think it's one of my most poetic and, if I can say, romantic. So, Segmented Sky from the first show in 2014, and you can get a sense of the dimensions, 22 inches high. So this is the work, both outside and inside, and I'm going to spend a few minutes telling you how I created this. It came about by the quote of the Cooper work, and also this particular passage from the novel Perspective as Symbolic Form, authored by Erwin Panofsky. Perspectiva is a Latin word which means seeing through. So this is a vertical rectangle, elegantly proportioned, and a line from the lower left corner points to a very specific point in space, as you can see, where the ascending diagonal line crosses the right line of the rectangle. A line is scribed horizontally to the left vertical, thus starting a sequence of diagonal and scribed horizontal lines that results in a pattern such as this. If you remove the horizontal lines and you erase the lines in space, you're left with this rectangle segmented in a certain way. Now the Panofsky line from the novel, perspectiva, means seeing through. I took that literally and cut the clay slab into these exact segments, edge treating the edges that form the diagonal lines, and reassembled the entire work in this pattern. So that when you walk around the work, segmented tower, all of the lines connect. Okay, everyone take a deep breath. I'm going to show you the next slide. This was obviously one of the World Trade Center towers that was destroyed during 9/11. And I wanted to use this both formally and conceptually as the way forward for the 12 wall sculptures in the show. The truncated vertical channels of the eruption series structure the work are at once architectural monuments and figures. I am consciously pursuing a carefully nuanced interrelationship between modernity conventions by signaling the machine and manufacturing with a desire to exploit the material warmth and skin-like characteristics inherent in clay. There are 7 white eruptions and 5 black. And here is a sampling of some of those. But first, I'm going to explain, again, how I approach, one might say, intellectually, the aspect of composition on the eruption works and it's the placement of the punctures that are littered throughout the channels. There are 12 eruption works, and they're each numbered 1, 2, 3, onward to 12. And they correspond to the paragraphs 1 through 12 of the novel The Road by Cormac McCarthy. So this middle paragraph, which is paragraph number 2, starting with the first gray light, is eruption number 2. A superimposition of the 5 channels over the text block of the novel and highlighting the 5 periods in the paragraph. So this is the composition of the punctures of each of the eruptions that are dedicated to paragraphs 1 through 12 of the novel. And here is that work realized. The process of making the eruptions involves first locating the holes, carving the puncture from the back to create a protrusion to convey a certain kind of stress or tension in the skin of the clay. It is then backed with a vessel. It's bisque fired. It's then glazed. And then a paper cone is used to pour fluxing materials of a particular formula into each of the vessels. It's then positioned vertically in the kiln and then fired. And in the firing process, the fluxing material will erupt from the puncture. Don't ask me to repeat that. So again, here are some of the eruption wall works. And I'm inserting a few slides here for references that are often really part of my thinking and approach to work. I don't ever feel that I'm an artist who solely relies on my own kind of narrative or experience, and I'm always reflecting on a sense of ceramic history. So the puncture here has significance in clay, as a significant work of this by Lucio Fontana. He's Argentinian born, who resides in Italy, and works with Asger Jorn and Richard Mons from Denmark to shift the trajectory of clay that is known as abstract expressionism. This is another significant clay moment in thousands of years earlier. This is a ceramic tablet from the ancient Syrian city of Ebla. And Ebla was discovered by a German archaeologist in the 1970s, where they excavated thousands of intact and shattered pieces of clay that were a form of civic record keeping for a very sophisticated civilization. Again, over 2,000 years BC. And in terms of tone, this is reflective of kind of the environmental catastrophe that prevails through the entire novel of The Road. This is a charcoal drawing, huge. Must be the size of this wall here, by Robert Longo. Here works only 4 that I dabbled with that aren't related to any of the 3 shows at Froelich. A work called Asphalt Bricks, and it's really an expression of my interest in urban decay. Prunus, Blossom, and Branch Vessel. That is a continuing interest of mine in the Chinese scholar object. It references the Huang Wali brushpot from the Qing dynasty on the left and the Taoist sculpture on the right. Black Sea, which is a nod to a Qing dynasty carved jade tray. A work titled Notation, that's a nod to the 20th century genius Isamu Noguchi. This is my second show at Froelich from 2017, and it's concurrent with NCECA, the second time it comes to Portland. So this was a chance to really put a stamp on something, a shift, I would say. And it's interesting that this statement, which I came upon recently from reading a book of interviews by Andrei Tarkovsky, and it's something that I totally believe in. A true artist does not experiment or search, he finds. And find I did indeed. In the photo essay in the New York Times Magazine supplement, and it was titled The Drone Zone by the photographer Sean Hermero, H-E-M-M-E-R-L-E. So I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But what really struck me about the beauty of the photo essay, and I do think it is beautiful, is just how subtly elegant and blown out the imagery was. If you look at this, even with your eyes open, it's starkly monochromatic, and yet it had a really lively composition of relief that really spoke to me. And so I also respond to the erotic nature of the objects that are being photographed. This being very similar to the ambiguously gay duo vehicle. That was a joke, it's a laugh. Can you see that? Can't see that. Sorry about that. You can sort of make that up. So this screen also, I think, was pivotal in informing what I was going to do, again, with the clay canvas that I had intended to make for the wall. And what's interesting about that screen is that it's conveying two types of information: the pictorial information and the data information that is informing what is happening in the picture. And you can see how I interpret it in this work called Landscape. I really love this work because it's loaded with so much intention and sadness. It's a very small work, but it occupied such importance in the gallery because it was hung away from the wall by itself, and it was beautifully lit both by the lights and the natural light coming through the glass. It's called Dismembered Star, and it talks about the sorry nature of our country. It's split, divided, separated in conflict. It also references the horizontal stripes of the flag. The dismembered aspect of the title refers to wounded warriors that are coming back with missing body parts. And I think that the entire nature of the thing conveys a kind of weakness, and the separations of the elements suggest discord. But it's not all sad, because I did a series of figurative work called Starfuckers. And with somber sadness, elegance, a slow pacing of work, I really wanted to throw in something very different. I was given the gallery guide cover, and I knew that because I was really known for doing very disciplined, aesthetic works, that I really wanted to just throw that all out. And thus born the Starfuckers. I love saying that. We should get a crowd that's over 18. Barely, I think. So I apologize to the teachers. No, but I do think that these are hysterical and really very cute, if I might add. But I think they're also, they do companion with the work really well. So there are 4 Starfuckers. And they're not that simple to make, believe me. Pentagon, in its finished wet clay realization, that was not simple to make. The thing that, I mean, there's obviously perfectionism in the making, but as all of you will know, particularly the center table, is that clay has memory. So to keep all the elements completely flat so that it doesn't warp in any of the phases of the clay is incredibly difficult. And I'm really pleased with just how it worked out. think we're doing really good on time. Here's the last third. The third show, Frolic, which is on view currently. I'm going to start with this quote. In reality, only a fragment carries the mark of authenticity. That was uttered by Bertolt Brecht. And from Nanni Valentini, a very renowned Italian ceramist. And he writes this, which I think is a very personal take on the Brecht quote. I do not seek a way to mark the earth or the images offered by its plasticity or the colors that evoke warmth. I seek those signs that can be detached, that will come out of it, and that I am able to understand. He's talking about a relationship of your mind, your hands, and what your hands are doing. And I think that the word understanding is very important, because if you keep that the focus of your trajectory of your creative making, you're bound to find something truly both personal and significant. So the title of the show currently on view is called Turbidity and the Peristaltic. I cannot tell you how many times the reply to the invitation or some announcement of the show, I had to go look up what those words meant, so I'm doing you the legwork here. Turbidity, muddy, opaque, or thick with suspended matter. Peristalsis. Successive waves of involuntary contraction passing along the walls of a hollow muscular structure, esophagus or intestine, and forcing the contents onward. We experience this all the time. Again, with each body of work, it allows the mind of the creative to really decide how to, what path to move forward with. And again, being restless and wanting to frickin' define the wheel again, I wanted to do something completely different. Whereas works previously achieved a stately standoffish stasis, now becomes fluid and invites touch. Works previously denied its material is now an expression of clay, with several people asking me, is this fired? Works previously were invested in weight and solid grounding, now becomes balanced on tangential points. Part of deciding to move the work in a different trajectory is obviously to pursue different ways of making. And I'm a person who never sketches. I admire all of you with notebooks, doodling away. I never did that before, and I said, okay, the gestural sketch is going to become part of my visual vocabulary in order to lay the groundwork for the formal construction methods. So I just doodled away and doodle. And it was really difficult. I could not believe how difficult that was to find forms that were, I could see three-dimensionally. But once I did realize or land on a quick sketch, I wanted to retain that completely through the 3D making process. Exact. So this section of the presentation is going to be a lot about process. And I think, well, hopefully all of you will get some kicks out of this, because it is quite complicated clay. Another gestural sketch. Individual works are conceived as an enveloping ribbon of clay that encloses on itself, which can be observed as the vessel rim. Contained within the planes that bisect this ribbon is where the drama unfolds. Amoebic forms slip and slide over one another, and in the turbidity works, discs of dissimilar diameters link together as a reticulated fence suggesting matter particles or a stream of floating red blood cells. So the ribbon of clay is created through rolling it very carefully with PVC piping. It maintains the vertical relationship with the working board, and you're able to completely control the outline of the clay, as if clay is now your drawing tool. The second of four things that really inform the work is the anatomical slice. This being a photograph of a self-portrait by Herbert Bayer, one of the originators of the Bauhaus. This is a self-portrait titled Humanly Impossible. One of the turbidity works, this one is called Reach. Hopefully you can make out here that the convex portions of the curves are all wrapped in hard plastic, so that when you're forming the curve, that you're not stretching the outer diameter of the clay ribbon, but compressing the internal surface to maintain the density of the clay, so that when it goes through the transformation, the weakness will not represent any stress points. This particular peristalsis work is informed by this painting by Vasily Kandinsky, a work called Vert et Rouge. And you can see my interpretation of it here. That's painted with a white slip. And then it is painted again with another surface. And this is in its fired state. I think Thomas loves the work that's uncharacteristically Whitney. This being fun. Yellow flower, blue flower, but they're not as simple because there's a lot of internal structure that happens to address the limitations of the clay material. And this is the back. It's identical to the other works in that the 6-inch ribbon is now replaced with a ribbon height of 1.25 inches, but the slab that fills in the petals is exactly in the middle of the clay wall. So it's seen as identical, even though its aesthetic may be very far from the other works. The third of the 4 guiding principles, I guess, of this body of work is the architectural cross-section. It's the drawing in red down below. It's a work by Le Corbusier. And this one is titled Turbidity Passage. The passage comes from a reference to this beautiful architectural detail designed by the very important modernist Italian architect Carlo Scarpa, and it's a realization at the Tomb Brion. All right, how to make a turbidity work. Yes, so the challenge, once you think of what you want to do, is to figure out how to make it. So the turbidity pattern is made up of discs, and you have discs facing outward, both frontal and backwards. So you start with lots of discs of different diameters. You draw out your ribbon of clay. You pattern the 2 colors to realize the 2 layers of discs. Count all the discs that you need in clay. You sculpt the discs using a form that is Dremel tooled credit card. You make all your discs. And then you arrange the discs on the pattern. You then have to score and slip and repair the entire thing. Tedious, but kind of fun. It's like being a dental hygienist. One of the other aesthetic references, the artist Victor Pasmore. He was an early abstractionist in the UK. He's creating a work at the Tate Modern there. Another aesthetic reference, the painting Very Rare Picture Upon the Earth by Francis Picabia. Oh, this is four guiding principles, and it's the mechanistic diagram, in this case, the painting by Picabia. You've been very attentive. Thank you very much.